Obsidian Entertainment is known for crafting deep, choice-driven RPGs, and with Avowed, they've developed a bold new spin on the beloved fantasy world of Eora. But does it live up to the studio's legacy? In this video, we'll dive deep into a full review and analysis of Avowed, from its story and combat to its world building and design. Welcome to Every Ghost Games. I'm a completionist gamer who primarily plays RPGs and story-driven games. I usually experience games through multiple playthroughs, stopping only when I feel I've seen everything a title has to offer. I believe this mindset gives me some credibility on this platform when sharing my thoughts. You might agree or disagree with what I say, of course, but at least you'll know I speak from solid experience. I've completed 3 full playthroughs of Avowed. I played a good aligned fighter, a neutral ranger on the highest difficulty, and an evil wizard. I've seen all the endings, but let's take it one step at a time. Avowed was released on February 18th, 2025 by Xbox Game Studios and developed by Obsidian Entertainment, a studio with a strong pedigree in RPGs. They're known for The Outer Worlds, the 2 Pillars of Eternity CRPGs, which share the same setting as Avowed, the underrated gem Tyranny, and going even further back, titles like Fallout New Vegas, Neverwinter Nights 2, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. They've made even more, but I think that's enough to put the studio into perspective. My first playthrough took about 75 hours, learning the systems, taking notes, exploring every nook and cranny, and doing absolutely everything the game had to offer. Later runs were faster, as they usually are, since I knew the mechanics and where to go to get things done. So, let's get this out of the way. Is Avowed a good action RPG? For me, it certainly is. Is it groundbreaking or a masterpiece? I wouldn't go that far. Does it have drawbacks or flaws that might impact the experience for some players? Yes, I believe it does. And if you're willing to stick with me, I'll walk you through both the strengths and weaknesses in detail. I'll start by saying that the €70 or $70 price tag is steep. Broadly speaking, this is a AA game that tries to bridge the gap into AAA territory, and it partially succeeds. For me, it lands somewhere in the middle. Pricing it at AAA level doesn't do it any favors, because it sets expectations the game can't quite meet. I don't think this was an Obsidian misstep, it's most likely a publisher decision. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if they're raising prices on purpose to push Game Pass subscriptions. In researching Avowed, I found out it was originally planned as a co-op live service game, and the direction shifted twice during development, similar to what happened with Dragon Age The Veilguard. At the start of 2021, the game's leadership changed, and Carrie Patel, a veteran of Pillars of Eternity and The Outer Worlds, took over as director. From what I understand, she played a key role in giving Avowed the direction it needed. She made the call to cut certain features to focus on the setting, the companions, and the fusion of action gameplay with traditional RPG mechanics. She even scrapped the open world concept in favor of an open zone design, offering smaller, interconnected open areas instead of one massive map. Broadly speaking, this game felt to me like a strange mix of Pillars of Eternity, Skyrim, Veilguard, and Horizon Zero Dawn. It couldn't have drawn inspiration from Dragon Age, of course, since both games were in development around the same time, but they do end up sharing some similarities. So yes, this ship has weathered some rough waters, but how did it emerge from the storm? Without further ado, let's dive in. At the time I'm making this video, Avowed has received a couple of patches that fixed some bugs. I bought the premium edition because I got weak and went on a shopping spree, but that gave me access to the game a few days before the official release, and I have to say the experience was pretty smooth. The game compiles its shaders the very first time you boot it up, and every time you update your graphic drivers, as expected. It takes a bit of time. On subsequent launches, it just verifies them, which is much quicker. I had a few hiccups here and there, maybe due to my hardware, which isn't the latest, but changing the settings multiple times didn't make much of a difference. Unreal Engine 4 usual stuff. Overall, it wasn't a big deal. I've heard of people experiencing massive frame drops in certain areas and seen enemy and companions animations in slow motion, but I didn't run into any of that myself. For me, the game never crashed and I never encountered a broken quest. Once, collisions simply disappeared and I wandered into a building stairs, and a couple of times I got stuck in the terrain while jumping around, but I never ran into a bug that a quick load couldn't fix. A couple of times, an enemy's corpse sank into the ground and I couldn't loot it, or I couldn't pick up some consumables from the floor. Once, a skeleton kept looping its idle animation even after being destroyed, and that was honestly pretty hilarious. Anyway, all very minor stuff. There are two things I didn't like. One is how the targeting system is quite finicky when using companion abilities. The other is the delay when you try to sprint. It's just a fraction of a second, but a tangible one. And in combat, you need to sprint, since you can't dodge forward. I'll talk more about that in the combat section. The game includes quite a few accessibility and UI options, and you can customize aiming and target locking behavior. A recent patch even added the option to lock the compass on the screen so it doesn't rotate with you, which for me was a big deal. I always find rotating compasses in games confusing. You can also tweak the loot shimmer effect, depending on whether you want a more streamlined or immersive experience. Overall, my experience was pretty polished. Again, very minor issues aside from the two combat-related things I mentioned, which I'll explain in more detail later. Character creation is pretty standard for an action RPG. You choose your character's appearance from a set of presets, and of course, you can modify them to fit your aesthetic preferences. You can only choose the appearance of a human or an elf, and that's tied to the lore of the Adiran Empire, where your character serves as a high-ranking official. You can't choose any of the other races from the setting, which might be a bummer for players familiar with the rich Pillars of Eternity universe. Sorry, you can't have a furry character. You are also godlike, meaning you were touched by a god while still in your mother's womb. Lore-wise, it can be seen as either a blessing or a curse. Aesthetically, this means you have to choose additional features that reflect this heritage, ranging from fungal to root-like appearances. It's mushroom galore. These vary from subtle to very prominent, and you can also choose not to display them in-game. NPCs, though, will still recognize and react to you as godlike, because it's necessary for the story. You can go pretty deep customizing your face shape, but I don't care that much about my character's appearance, so as usual, I applied slight modifications to a preset and was good to go. I imagine you could spend hours on this, if that's your inclination. Once you're done with the appearance, you choose one of 5 character backgrounds. These backgrounds explain how you gain the Emperor's attention and provide a small attribute bonus, which you can redistribute right away. More importantly, on the role-playing side of things, your background unlocks unique dialogue options. Some are just flavor, while others can help you solve quests more efficiently. For example, the War Hero and Vanguard Scout are more military-oriented, while the Noble Scion can come off as arrogant but well-versed in diplomacy and politics. Next, you distribute your starting points across 6 attributes. These are well explained and pretty classic in how they influence gameplay. If you've played any other RPG, they should feel familiar. The standout for me is Might, which affects all damage types, not just physical. So if you're a wizard and want to deal more damage, you'll want to raise this stat too. An attribute's maximum value at character creation is 3, and the in-game cap is 15. You'll find equipment that boosts attributes, but nothing will push them over 15. Keep that in mind. You might want to redistribute points later, which you can do easily by paying a modest fee. You won't be able to max out every attribute, so I recommend focusing on 3. For example, my tanky warrior focused on might, constitution, and resolve. The ranger focused on might, dexterity, and perception. And the wizard focused on might, intellect, and perception. Since this is an action RPG with combat as a major component, might always seemed like a crucial stat to raise. To finalize your character, you choose a name, voice, and other standard details. Avowed offers 5 difficulty levels, with Path of the Damned being the hardest. I did my second run on the highest difficulty. While I died a lot at the beginning, it became manageable over time. It wasn't a terrible challenge, and I'm not the kind of player who enjoys excessively frustrating games. As for character progression, you gain experience by completing quests and defeating enemies, which allows you to level up and earn attributes and ability points. You also gain a little bit of experience discovering new zones, but the amount is pretty much negligible. Pretty standard stuff. The ability points are spent across 3 skill trees: Fighter, Ranger, and Wizard. You can freely mix and match abilities across them. I'm sure creative players will come up with fun and broken multi-classing builds, if you'll forgive the D&D term. I mostly stuck with the core classes, occasionally dipping into others when it made sense. For example, my sword and shield fighter picked up some ranger skills to enhance one-handed sword damage. The wizardry is a bit unique, thanks to the Grimoire Mastery skill, which lets you cast spells without equipping a grimoire. Grimoires contain different spells, and by unlocking the relevant mastery and owning specific grimoires, you gain permanent access to those spells, and can even boost their power. If you've unlocked a spell both in your wizard tree and in your current grimoire, it will be cast at a higher level. As I've mentioned in earlier videos, I'm not much of a spellcaster, but I did a full evil playthrough as a wizard. Spellcasting was more fun in combat than other builds. I'll go deeper into this in the combat section. While the system works fine for an action RPG, I imagine some players, especially those familiar with the Pillars of Eternity games, will find it overly simplified. For instance, while you can emulate a monk using skills like Flurry of Blows, you'll never truly create a monk or chanter class. You also can't play a dedicated healer. Interestingly, these archetypes do appear among enemy types. So at the end of the day, I think some players will enjoy dipping into various trees to create custom builds, while others will see it as too simplistic or dumbed down. Your mileage may vary. In addition to class trees, there are also godlike and companion skill trees. Godlike abilities are unlocked not by spending points, but through story choices and specific activities. I won't go into more detail to avoid spoilers. Companion trees are straightforward. You earn companion ability points every few levels and decide which skill to develop. Every few levels, you also gain attribute points. Early on, you get 1 per level, then 1 every 2 levels after level 10. A later patch added another point every 5 levels. Just like with ability points, attributes can be reallocated by paying a small fee. The cost increases with your level and the total points you've distributed, but it was never a major expense given the amount of gold I had. The max level is 30, and reaching it requires doing nearly everything the game has to offer. You don't need to complete every single fight on every map, but you'll need to finish almost all quests and side activities. It's a bit unusual. Most RPGs give you plenty of experience if you do the majority of the content. Upgrading your gear is a core part of Avowed progression system, and I think this mechanic will get a mixed reception. Instead of using level recommendations, quests are marked relative to your current gear level. Skulls indicate difficulty based on your equipment, and in a kind of MMO-light way, enemies deal and receive dramatically different damage based on this gap. This kind of forces you to explore and do side content before tackling the main story. I'm neutral on this, it just swaps out traditional leveling for a gear-focused system. But scavenging for upgrade materials isn't quite the same as completing story content. At the end of the day, I think character creation and the progression system combine standard RPG mechanics with a few odd design choices, particularly around the grind for gear, which isn't huge by any means, but it's there. These choices won't please everyone. Exploration is a huge part of Avowed. As mentioned, the game almost forces you to be thorough in order to progress. The Living Lands are a big island, almost a continent I would say, with different ecosystems. Excluding the prologue and ending zones, the game takes place in 4 distinct open areas, each with smaller attached zones for settlements and dungeon interiors. They call it an open zone design to differentiate it from the traditional open world concept. Each zone is unique in appearance, sound design, and the culture of the people who inhabit it. These regions range from lush to barren, each with its own twist. All of them have a major settlement that hosts a population brought together from one reason or another. Everything is explained in the game's lore through books and notes you can read, but also shown through dialogue with NPCs and companions. If there is one thing Avowed nails, it's its setting. You're playing in a remote part of Eora, Pillars of Eternity's world, and it feels like it. The main story takes you through each of these zones, which, once unlocked, can be freely traveled between. The areas are decently large and full of content, though not all of this content is created equal. You can sprint across an entire zone in just a couple of minutes, but once discovered, you can also fast travel to beacons or party camps. The zones are beautiful to traverse, vibrant and immersive. While there is nothing groundbreaking about them, they make good use of verticality. You can jump and climb to discover loot and hidden locations. It's not on Tomb Raider or Horizon's level of free climbing, but it works pretty well. Each area features the same types of activities: side quests, bounties, treasure maps, God's totem pieces to collect, Adra pillars to clear, dwarven caches to uncover, and memories to unfold. I won't go into too much detail because some are spoiler heavy. Most of these are optional, but considering the gear progression system I mentioned earlier, you'd better do most or all of them. Besides side quests, treasure hunts can be rewarding with unique gear you may want for your build, and completing God's totems grants powerful buffs and insight into the God's thoughts on the current events. Each totem requires you to find 6 pieces tied to a specific god, scattered throughout the same map. Some other activities deepen the lore and story while rewarding you with a hefty amount of experience. In nearly every nook and cranny you explore, you'll find some sort of treasure, which shows the devs clearly anticipated you going there and wanted to reward you. But here's where Avowed starts to slip into AA territory. You find chests, lockboxes, backpacks, corpses to loot, and more, some even hard to reach. They emit a distinct sound to help you locate them, but there are no visual clues on their general whereabouts, and I wonder about accessibility here. For example, Veilguard, besides having sound cues for loot, also provides a visual blipping indicator when you're near a chest. Anyway, these loot containers glow with the colored light indicating the relative value of their contents: blue, violet, or gold. I say relative because I think this is tied to the zone you're in. What may be marked as golden loot in an early zone could be blue in later ones, unless it's something truly rare, like Adra fragments. More on Adra later. What I didn't like is that the vast majority of these containers give you crafting materials or non-magical equipment you end up breaking down for more materials. It's a mechanic that screams, we thought about rewarding exploration, but ran out of time and money, so here's a cheap fix. And it made me sigh a little. I love exploring. I always dedicate a good chunk of my videos to this aspect of a game. I was thrilled to jump, climb, and discover hidden loot. But after a while, it got boring because the loot was almost always the same junk. You can give it different names and tiers, but it still boils down to metal, wood, leather, plants, and so on. That said, you don't always find common materials. Sometimes you come across unique items hidden in obscure or secret places. Uniques are magical items you want to keep and upgrade if they match your build, or break down for rare materials if they don't. The issue is they're few and far between. Avowed is not Skyrim, with a magical item under every rock. For example, there are only 3 unique ones in the entire game. I haven't counted every weapon type, but it's the same story. Personally, I prefer the Skyrim approach. It gave exploration more meaning, even if many of the magical items were useless. That's an easy fix for Avowed though. Just add more uniques in a patch. Scatter them across the living lands, and exploration becomes instantly more rewarding. If some end up being overpowered, balance them later. It's a single-player game. Balance isn't a huge deal, at least in my opinion. Besides loot, you also want to gather all the plants you come across. There are lots of them, but they fall into 3 categories. One type heals, restores essence, your mana, or grants temporary buffs. Another is for upgrading gear, with different names and tiers per region. The third one is throwable, used as grenades. They're marked on your minimap with unique icons and are easy to spot. Grenades, or throwables, help clear passageways or open alternate paths in zones and dungeons. You can also use them to inflict conditions like fire or poison on enemies, but I didn't find them very useful in combat, even on the highest difficulty. The game also encourages detours. If you go off the beaten path and grab a plant or loot a marked corpse, you might stumble upon a hidden cave or treasure. Avowed lures you in, then lets you discover something extra. I liked that. But with so much to find, I desperately wanted a way to mark things on the map, and there isn't one. That's something they really need to fix with the patch. Sometimes you'll find a locked chest you can't open yet, or a place you want to return to later, but there is no way to mark it and you'll probably forget about it. Speaking of locked containers, Avowed doesn't have a real stealth system. There are a few murder bushes you can hide in for starting combat, but their usefulness is limited. In terms of exploration, locked doors and chests require lockpicks. There is no tedious lockpicking minigame, nor any skills to make it easier. You just just consume a set number of lockpicks. It reduces the system to simply buying as many lockpicks as you can. Again, it feels like they wanted a system but couldn't fully implement it. Very double A with the publisher deadline. Another missing system, crime. There is none. Occasionally, one might comment on what you're doing, but that's it. You can loot everything everywhere. Something I'm absolutely guilty of in many games, and no one bats an eye. Look, I know they say Avowed isn't Skyrim, but it's impossible not to compare the two. Maybe because Skyrim is the most iconic first-person action RPG. One area where the comparison stands out most is in environmental storytelling. We all remember that skeleton in a haystack, hand outstretched towards the bottle of ale in one of Skyrim's first dungeons. It meant nothing, but it was funny. Avowed has a lot of similar moments. My favorite was reliving a memory of an ancient civilization punished for trying to cut down a tree, and then finding a skeleton and a unique axe stuck in a massive tree right after. You'll also find multiple ways to approach situations, like solving a puzzle to open a gate or using a grenade to blow open a hidden passage. Dungeons are beautifully designed, often without maps. You only get maps in outdoor areas, full of traps and puzzles. They're not too large, thank God, I'm still recovering from Daggerfall, and usually include shortcuts like drops or back doors to reduce backtracking, which I appreciated. Companions do walk into traps like in Skyrim, and yes, I'm looking at you, Lydia. Puzzles are usually easy, thankfully, since I'm not a puzzle fan. You just need to find a generator, flip a lever, or follow some cables. Companions can help with this, each having a unique environmental ability, except for poor Marius, who doesn't get one. For instance, Kai can burn thorns, just like a fire grenade. Giata activates generators, like an electric throwable. Yathli dispels illusions, and there is no grenade alternative for that, so you're forced to bring her along in certain areas. This imbalance, and Marius being left out, bothered me way more than it should have. Again, it feels like something is missing. Oh, and yes, you can smash crates, pods, and pottery, just like in any good RPG. Not many have loot though. If there is anything important inside, you'll see the glowing loot light through it. You'll also come across barred doors that spark curiosity, making you search for a way around to get inside. Finally, opening them is surprisingly satisfying. Now, aside from mechanics, if you're a bookworm, Avowed as you covered. Paying attention to books, notes, and little details reveals a ton. I'm pretty sure I found a book referencing the Grieving Mother, a companion from Pillars of Eternity 1. Dialogue works similarly. If you stop and listen, you'll hear NPCs talking among themselves. I caught a reference to Kaliska, another companion from the first game, and even an Easter egg about Kal Nua's banner. You can learn a lot just by listening. There is a day-night cycle, but it doesn't change much. Traveling at night is gorgeous. The vibrant colors of the living lands stand out more in contrast, and you'll sometimes find enemies asleep. Fast traveling to camp resets time in the morning. Camps are where you craft, enchant, swap companions, and talk to them. I'll talk more about companions in their dedicated section, but their camp dialogue is usually interesting and well acted. Banter ranges from deep emotional conversations to silly pranks between party members. I loved this. It made them feel alive and believable. Honestly, I think the camp banter here is incredibly better written than Veilguard's.
Right. Did someone eat my special cheese?
Cheese? No, not me. What about you, Kai?
Believe me, you'd know if I'd eaten it.
It was medicinal cheese for my stomach, and someone ate it.
Oh, rats, maybe?
Well, someone ate it. The sooner they confess, the sooner we can move past it.
Guess we'll be here a while.
Right. I thought this might happen, which is why I took the liberty of going through Kai's pockets.
Uh-oh.
Guess what I found? Crumbs. Cheese crumbs.
That doesn't prove anything.
It's my fault, Marius. I was starving, and Kai was generous enough to share.
Marius, I'm sorry for enjoying your special cheese.
That cheese was aged 10 years in a seaside cave. Next time you're peckish, ask and I'll get you something fresher.
For what it's worth, it was delicious.
Oh, I know, Giada. I know.
A cool trick is that you can leave camp from the camp's actual location or just teleport back to wherever you were before. It makes quick camp trips painless, something I appreciated. I've seen complaints about the cities in Avowed, but they're fine by me. They're not massive, and this isn't an immersive sim where NPCs follow daily routines or go home to sleep. They're just quest hubs with merchants and some secrets to uncover, though I get why people might find that simplistic. This game launched around the same time as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is basically a medieval life simulator. Personally, I liked games like Arena or Kingdom Come, but role-playing every mundane task gets old after a while. I don't need to wash myself, eat, or talk to every NPC in every RPG. So I get the criticism, but I wasn't bothered. Still, I can see how it pushes the game more toward AA territory. Speaking of that, there is a swimming mechanic, but it doesn't go very far. It works fine, don't get me wrong. You can explore a bit underwater, find the occasional plant or treasure, even a few hidden pads, but the open sea offers nothing, just invisible walls. That's a shame. The swimming system is good, and a couple of underwater dungeons would have added a nice change of pace. Even Ghost from the Future here. While I was recording this video, a new patch, 1.4, came out. It includes quite a few of the improvements I suggested in this very script, so I figured it was a good time to mention them after the exploration chapter. I haven't tested them myself. After 180 hours, I'm thoroughly done with Avowed, unless they release new content. They added an arachnophobia mode that transforms spiders into floating orbs. It wasn't an issue for me, but I have a friend who's severely arachnophobic, and I thought he might have had a hard time playing this game. Opening the game up to new potential players is always a smart move. Another thing I didn't mention earlier, because it felt minor and I didn't want to nitpick that much, is that the fog of war you dispel while exploring had a very limited radius around your character, so the map ended up looking messy and uncleared. They've now fixed it by clearing the entire zone map once you explored most of its accessible areas, and they also increased that fog clearing radius. You can now wait at camp to advance time, which is great. It lets you enjoy more nighttime exploration. As I mentioned before, the game world at night is incredibly immersive and beautiful. Finally, soul pods now dispel illusions. This was Yatzli's unique ability, the only one you couldn't replicate with grenades. If memory serves, it's been a while. Soul pods are the throwables that poison enemies. So now, one of those frustrating asymmetries I noted is resolved, and I really appreciate it. Also, chests can now appear on the minimap. I imagine it's a toggle you can activate in the options menu. Very handy. That's the bulk of the 1.4 update, or at least the parts I find interesting. There are a ton of bug fixes too, but you can check those out yourself if you're curious. With this patch, they also revealed the roadmap for the summer and fall updates. The most interesting bit to me is the addition of custom map markers, something I really wanted to see from the beginning. They're also planning to add new abilities, NPC behaviors, character presets, more loot, and new weapon types. It's all still pretty vague, but it shows that Obsidian is a solid studio that cares about and supports its games. Thanks for listening. Now, back to the review and analysis. Combat is an important part of Avowed, as you might expect from an action RPG. I've seen some enthusiastic reports about it, but to be honest, for me it was just fine. Not bad by any means, fun enough, but nothing too special either, and I'm going to explain why. The first point I want to make is that your experience with combat in this game may vary greatly, depending on your character build. I don't expect everyone to do multiple playthroughs, most players won't, so your mileage may vary. That's why I did different runs with different classes. You can also mix and match from the various tree I mentioned in the progression system section. Fighting as the warrior or ranger is generally tedious, or it was for me, while playing as a wizard was more fun. I did my first run as a sword and board fighter. It was enjoyable at first, especially using shield parries. You can interrupt enemies with shield bashes and power attacks too. The problem is the lack of variety in this gameplay style. It gets repetitive over time. You manage stamina, dodge the red-marked unblockable attacks, and that's pretty much it. Enemies tend to focus and swarm you, so this build offers the most survivability. But a lot of the skills in the fighter tree are passives, and you unlock very few active abilities. Don't get me wrong, it works well. and it's very clear even in third-person view, which I tried for a while. It's just the same burger over and over again. The same can be said for the stealth archer. There is no real stealth system in Avowed. Instead, you unlock an invisibility ability in the ranger tree that consumes essence. You use it to disengage and land sneak attacks, either with your first godlike ability or with the bow. The combat loop was to charge a power shot, headshot, repeat. When your tank companion fails, and that happens a lot, you turn invisible, disengage, revive the tank, and repeat. I did my Path of the Damned run with this build and cheesed the heck out of it. The high difficulty forced me to think laterally since companions don't last long in battle, and they couldn't face enemies directly. That's when the cracks in the combat system started to show. Many enemies can jump or crouch, so finding high ground makes you untouchable. Just watch out for ranged or magic users. Some Zoribs threw stones like they had a nuclear launcher instead of tiny lizard arms, but that was the exception. You learn to read the attack indicators and dodge accordingly. If you keep your distance, enemies retreat without resetting their health, and you can abuse that. Some, even bosses, just got stuck and stopped moving. Easy prey. On the other end, the wizard is far more fun. There is a wide selection of spells once you unlock Grimoire Mastery and collect a few grimoires. You get magic armor, missiles, elemental conditions like frost and burn, and of course, big upfront damage. I wasn't a fan of the conditions. They felt underwhelming to build up and did too little damage over time. In Horizon, for example, you could build up conditions with multiple arrows and exploit machine weaknesses. Here, you can't tell enemy weaknesses except through trial and error, and the damage feels low. So I went full nuclear, pure raw damage with magic missiles and AoE spells. My go-to tactic became cast armor, run into enemies to aggro them, then unload AoE spells on myself, since there is no friendly fire. It was highly effective. I cleaned up the rest with missiles or buffed up wound damage via crafting and skills. I discovered this tactic by accident because aiming abilities in this game don't work well. AoE indicators often didn't trigger anything, and companion abilities sometimes just failed. I'd ask Kai to taunt an enemy directly in front of me, only to hear him say, "Attack what?" while I got pummeled. As I often say, maybe that's a skill issue on my part, but after 3 playthroughs, I'm convinced it's not all me. Another annoyance is you can't dodge forward. Dodging is a core mechanic, even with the shield build. Red attacks are powerful and drain your stamina completely if blocked. If that happens, you get staggered for a couple of seconds and mobbed. Managing stamina, the white bar that appears dynamically, is crucial. Often, enemies hit from behind, and if you can't dodge forward, you try to sprint. But sprinting takes almost a second to activate, and by then you're already hit. Also, there is delay in regaining control when exiting menus, opening the map, or using the radial companion menu. If you're playing a wizard, your hotbar is already packed with spells, so fitting companion skills in it is a problem. I considered this might be a keyboard driver issue, so let me know if you experience the same delays. Companion behavior in combat is very similar to Veilguard. You don't directly control them. They act on their own and mostly exist as an extra skill pool. They do minimal damage with their basic attacks. When one finally downs a monster, you cheer. "Congrats, Marius, you did something," but you don't need to. Companions cheer each other with such cringy self-indulgence that they couldn't help but wins. Or maybe that's just me. I went to a non-run kindergarten where the most emotion shown was contempt, so compliments feel alien. Unlike Veilguard, in Avowed, companions have health bars. Once depleted, they're down. You must manually revive them, adding another layer of combat management. Now, I don't want you to think combat is bad. It's not. It's just not amazing. I started with the annoying part because the reviews I've read didn't really touch on them. There are good things too. Weapons and spells feels meaty, with a sense of weight. Enemies come in groups with different roles, and you'll want to kill healers first. They'll undo your efforts fast. A good strategy is to kill in order: healers, casters, ranged, melee. Enemies prioritize you unless taunted, and they love to swarm. If your tank falls or loses aggro, you're mobbed. A patch increased the tank's resistance, but it's still not enough. If this were an MMO, you'd constantly hear, "Tank can't hold aggro." Some enemies arrive in waves, others can parry or turtle up like you, requiring special tactics. There are 4 core bars to track: health, essence, aka mana, stamina, and stun. Food doesn't heal much in combat, just useful for buffs or out-of-combat healing. Potions are vital, and how fast you drink them depends on your dexterity. If you're hit during drinking, you'll drop the potion. It will fall on the ground, which is a cool touch. Stun builds up with attacks. When full, you can perform a special attack. It's definitely not a finisher, and I didn't find it that impactful. Killing enemies drops essence, which restores your purple bar. Unless you're a wizard and invested in essence recovery passives, it's minimal. But it raised an interesting question for me. Are we stealing the souls of the dead to power ourselves? Are we the bad guys, even if we choose the good story path? Do we have latent animancy powers? Fascinating. When using ranged weapons, right-clicking aims and shows weak points, but honestly just aim for the head. There is a half-hearted stealth mechanics with bushes, but it feels abandoned halfway through the game. You can ambush a group, but unless you use invisibility, they'll swarm you immediately. And even backstabs won't kill most enemies unless you're on easy difficulty. I stopped even bothering. Enemy variety isn't huge. You get lizards, spiders, bandits, zombies, skeletons, but they repeat across maps. Even dwarven skeletons are human-sized. Feels like a run out of time and money moment. On the plus side, sometimes enemy factions fight each other, which is a nice touch. But then you see NPCs like paladins or guards frozen during battles, clearly missing a faction AI script, and it breaks immersion. Now, onto gear. It's a major part of progression. There's a basic crafting system to upgrade your weapons and armor. No gloves, boots, or jewelry though. They are part of your gear, but you can't upgrade them. Your average item level affects your ability to fight tougher enemies or complete quests. These are marked by Roman numerals and skulls on their health bar or in your journal. If you're under-equipped, they take less damage and hit harder. Classic MMO logic that pushes you toward side content first. Crafting is simple once you get the hang of it. Gear has a starting quality based on the zone you're in. You upgrade it using resources, wood, pelts, metals, or plants, tiered by zone. You can upgrade inside the same quality level up to 3 times using these resources. To jump categories, for example from fine to superior quality, you need special materials, usually some form of Adra. Adra is a soul-conducting material central to the Pillars of Eternity lore. It channels souls to the beyond for reincarnation via the wheel. But due to events from the second game, Deadfire, no spoilers, that system broke. Now we siphon soul energy from the dead instead. Mechanically, Adra is rare. You'll find it in special loot or buy it at high prices. You can also break down unique gear for Adra, and since some key resources are tight, you'll only invest in gear for your chosen build. There is no room to upgrade multiple sets, even if you do all the content. You can equip 2 weapon loadouts. Maybe someone made dynamic builds like in Guild Wars 2, switching back and forth. I didn't. I stuck with what worked. There are also basic systems for cooking and enchanting. Cooking grants temporary buffs, while enchanting lets you pick between 2 upgrade pads for unique gear. That's it. It needs monster parts, and I always ended up hoarding hundreds just to use 5. Enchanting feels like a prototype, bare bones and undercooked. Also, killing dozens of enemies to loot a sausage or potato? Kinda depressing. Currency is divided into copper, silver, and gold skit. A silver is worth 6 copper, and a gold is worth 12. It's a small thing, but I like it. As an old-school D&D player, having different coin types adds flavor, and the game converts it all automatically, so no hassle. To wrap up, the crafting and loot systems feel like they needed more development time. I'm not big on crafting myself, I prefer looting gear off warm corpses, but when systems are this basic, it raises some questions. That said, inventory management is fantastic. Ingredients and materials weigh nothing, only weapons and armor do. You can break or stash gear instantly. At camp, you can sort it all without hassle. It's simple, intuitive, and perfect for an action RPG. Big thumbs up to the devs for getting this part right. Inventory is often one of the most painful parts in RPGs, and when you play a lot of them, you immediately notice this quality of life improvement. When it comes to Avowed's story, I'm only going to talk about its setup and a few other things in very broad strokes, since this is a recent game and I don't want to spoil it too heavily. As mentioned in the character creation section, you are godlike, a human or elf who has been touched by one of the gods while your mother was still pregnant. Usually, the gods mark their godlike in a very telling way, but it's unclear which god chose you. Depending on the background you choose, your character ends up as a high functionary of the Adiran Empire, a decaying state built on the ashes of ancient, warring human and elven nations. The Living Lands, where the game is set, are a continent northeast of the Empire, and everything about them is pure frontier. People fled there, mostly from your empire or from Ruatai, the fish-like folk empire, looking for a second chance. Most of them have run-ins with the law, whether rightly or wrongly. You're sent to the Living Lands by your emperor on an official mission to stop the Dream Scourge, a sort of epidemic ravaging the continent that the emperor fears might spread to Aedir. It's left vague whether this is your true goal, or if there is something else going on behind the scenes, and I think that's intentional. As the emperor's envoy, you can decide how to behave, whether to focus solely on the Dream Scourge, to deal with the local politics, or act as a part of a broader colonization effort. The Living Lands aren't part of the Empire, but an embassy has been established at their main port, Paradis. The ambassador brought quite a few soldiers with him. Some people welcome the stability the adherents can bring to the frontier, while others want nothing to do with any kind of authority, as you might expect from frontier folk. To complicate things, a company of paladins called the Stilgarroth has arrived, led by Inquisitor Ludwig. They're entirely devoted to the goddess Wodica, goddess of law, justice, and vengeance, who's highly revered in the Empire. Ludwig actually died in the second Pillars of Eternity game. You saw her for maybe 30 seconds, but she was too stubborn to stay dead, and returned as an undead knight to continue serving Wodica. They're a charming bunch who see everything as a nail and themselves as the hammer. If you confront them or try to pull rank, they're quick to inform you that their allegiance is to Wodica, not the Emperor, and they're fully willing to go rogue if you get in their way. Of course, for the locals, there's no difference between you and them, and this is the power keg that is the Living Land. Moving from the broader setup to the story itself, of course, you shipwreck and wake up on a small island with a single survivor. This serves as your prologue and tutorial zone. Right away, you'll encounter the Dream Scourge. It has taken over the local garrison, turning soldiers into either corpses or fungal zombies. The tutorial is mostly immersive, with your companion walking you through the basics, although there are some standard in-game pop-up tutorials as well. In this ruined garrison, you'll find an imprisoned smuggler who despises your empire. You can choose to free her or let her rot.
That's the Imperial envoy you're talking to. Show some respect.
The Imperial? Shite, I should have known you were Adherents too. Funny you survived while all your friends here went belly up. Adir's had their boot on Paradis since their first soldiers came.
'Cause the place is pure chaos.
Did you not think we liked it that way? I have to smuggle just to get anything past your damn checkpoints.
The game makes it clear that your choice will have consequences at the end of the prologue, and depending on what you decide, you may even meet her again later. Eventually, you use her smuggling boat to reach Paradis, where the real game begins. In the city, you immediately meet your first companion, Kai, receive your first side quests, discover vendors, and get involved in the tangled web of local politics. I'm stopping here because there is a very nice, unforeseen event early on, and I don't want to spoil it. The main story has 5 major endings, with multiple permutations based on your choices, affecting factions, settlements, and more. At key moments, usually at the end of a regional story arc, you'll face important decisions that clearly carry weight. Some consequences will hit you much later, while others are immediate and so over the top that you'll ask yourself, oh my god, what am I doing? One major decision isn't even tied to a marked quest. You'll have to explore to stumble upon it. Generally speaking, the story is interesting, but it's easy to see where things are going. I immediately guessed the source of the Dream Scourge and the identity of the mysterious voice that haunts your dreams. And I don't think I'm particularly smart, it was just very easy to guess. This voice appears often, and after a few encounters, I really just wanted it to shut up and leave me alone. It's a solid enough story for an action RPG, but if you've played the Pillars of Eternity games, don't expect that level of intricacy or depth. That might be due to the medium. CRPGs are better suited for complex stories simply because they can throw thousands of words at you. Many action RPG fans wouldn't stand for that. I read a headline from a gaming magazine that said something like, Avowed is a fantastic action RPG with the Pillars of Eternity boring lore, and I think that nails the contrast. The earlier games and Avowed are largely meant for different audiences. At the end of the day, while the main story can be engaging to a point, it doesn't quite reach the heights Obsidian is known for. Side quests vary in quality. Some dig into deeper themes like poverty, the right to choose how to end your own life, tradition versus innovation, and justice. You'll often pause to weigh your options and consider the consequences. Others, though, aren't so engaging. A few influence the ending, while others only impact a handful of NPCs. I won't spoil the best ones, but I'll mention a particularly underwhelming moment. I asked a guard in a very strict settlement to release a prisoner, and she did, without any resistance. I had no real authority, yet she complied. I didn't persuade, intimidate, or deceive her. It felt like a rushed solution that didn't match the culture of that entire zone.
How should I know? The wardens just left him here. Ha, fine. I'm not paid enough to handle legal debates. You're free to go.
About time. I owe you, whoever you are.
That was an example, but I noticed several quests in the final open zone ended abruptly, almost like they ran out of time or budget and had to wrap things up quickly. On the flip side, the game's ending, the epilogue if you will, is surprisingly long and well executed. It feels planned and satisfying. All quests are marked with a skull rating from 1 to 3 in your journal, indicating relative difficulty based on your current equipment. I've already explained how this works, so I won't dwell on it. A patch made quest difficulties more accessible, and you can now navigate between them more easily. Every quest, task, and activity is marked on your map with a different icon once acquired. Obsidian slipped a few Easter eggs into their own game, like a quest titled The Wasteland Courier or an achievement for the evil ending called Tyranny. Little notes that fans of their older titles will recognize. Dialogues with NPCs usually give you 3 to 6 options, including those tied to your background or attribute scores, but often there's just a good or bad way to handle things. Your choices usually lead to the same outcome, with slightly altered wording or dialogue branches that loop back. Even if you say you're not interested in a quest, it still gets added to your journal. In my evil playthrough, I treated people terribly, and they still handed me quests and thanked me afterward. A great feature in dialogue is the ability to review past lines and access a glossary of all lore-specific terms. You'll pick them up over time, but if you forget, it's super helpful to have that just a button away. Big thumbs up for that. There are also a few unmarked minor interactions, small favors you can do for NPCs that may lead to rewards. One, which I already mentioned, isn't marked at all but carries major consequences. NPC quality is mixed. Some are forgettable, while others are surprisingly compelling. In general, they're spread across the spectrum, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with how important they are to the main story. Some completely missable NPCs offer fascinating perspectives on the world. Others are just plain funny.
We pass on the oral histories of Solace and seek to uncover those historical knowledge we have lost over time. In return, the unenlightened Getuli of Solace curse, spit, and throw objects at us. It is truly a symbiotic relationship. Ah, our beloved founder. Nandru sought to create a sanctuary in the deadliest part of the island. He called it Solace. Many believe Nandru was led here by a spirit guardian of some kind. Others believe he was simply an excellent judge of location. Regardless, many of his traditions remain in place to this day, while others may have fallen by the wayside.
I don't expect every settler or scout to be memorable, so I'm not complaining, just making an observation. My only advice here, if you're using Italian names for your quest givers, maybe double check what those surnames actually mean before committing. Companions deserve their own chapter. They're generally well written, very well acted, and interesting. Some may appeal to you more than others, depending on your personal taste, and my only real complaint is that there are only 4 of them. Broadly speaking, there are 2 good and 2 neutral ones, and you really miss having a couple of evil companions for an evil run. That leads to some absurd moments, like a companion getting angry at you for deleting his home from existence, only to go back to being nice in the next line. Minor spoiler here, you can can see this straight from the achievements. If you go full evil, they'll leave you right at the end, and it feels forced. With all the bad things I did in that run, they should have left much sooner. But then I would have been stuck playing solo, which the game doesn't allow. A more natural approach would have been to give you two despicable people to accompany you, even when all the others abandon you. Alas, that's not the case. Kai is the first companion you meet, the tank of the group. He's the common guy with a lot of common sense, rarely judging anyone. Marius is a dwarven ranger, a rough guy with a lot to unpack. He's unlikable at first, but as his personal story develops, I ended up liking him quite a bit. Giata is an animancer, a soul mage, and your healer. She's intense. You'll see it the moment you meet her. Yatzli is another mage, focused on offensive spells, and a historian studying the vanished civilizations of the living land. She's the one I didn't like much. She's messy, unnecessarily flirty, and loud. She does have the best swears though. Companions level up with you, but they only gain 1 ability point every 4 levels. They get a maximum of 8 ability points at player level 30. You can spend those to buy abilities or to upgrade existing ones. For example, making Kai more resistant when using a taunt, or letting Giata buff you when she heals. In my opinion, not all companions fit the gameplay mechanics equally well. Playing without Kai, the tank, is downright painful. Giata, despite being the healer, isn't that important thanks to the abundance of healing options the game gives you. Marius doesn't perform well in combat, at least in my opinion, but not bringing him to the last zone feels criminal. Plus, he's needed for some interactions. They feel unfinished. Only 2 of them, Kai and Marius, have personal quests, while Giata and Yatzli don't. Kai, Giata, and Yatzli all have special abilities for interacting with the environment, but Marius doesn't. And until the last patch, while you can use fire or electric grenades to substitute for Kai and Giata's abilities, there is no equivalent for Yatzli's. You had to bring her along to dispel illusions. Not a big deal, you can easily switch companions at camp and return to the same spot, but it's slightly annoying, and the asymmetry among companions bothers me. Veilguard handled this better, letting you channel companion powers via Delirium Dagger, even if the corresponding companion wasn't with you. And all companions had a special skill to interact with the environment. Also, you can't change your companion's weapons or armor, while in Veilguard you could. These are 2 of the rare cases where Veilguard did things better than Avowed. Yes, I'm comparing 2 action RPGs from massive publishers, released just 4 months apart. I'm unhinged. That said, one thing Avowed does better than Veilguard, and there are quite few of those, is that companions will ask for your opinion on personal matters, but they won't necessarily follow your advice. They're written as living, thinking people, not placeholders. You do influence their endings, but not through a binary choice at the end of their personal quests. It's more like your influence rubs off on them over time across the whole story. There are some silly moments, like a companion being banished from a city but still walking freely through it with you and nobody bats an eye. Or another companion who's essentially a deserter, but when you return to his home settlement, nobody arrests him. They're actually happy to see him. I get that it's done for playability, but my suspension of disbelief can only stretch so far. Companions will constantly judge your decisions during quests, and they all have different opinions. Sometimes I found myself saying, "Oh come on, shut up," at my own screen. But if they're getting a reaction out of me, that means they feel like real people. And that's a win in my book. Too bad you can't romance them. I was very interested in Giata with my good character, and curious to see how far I could pull Kai from the light with my bad girl. The absence of romance in an RPG is a bit strange, but I believe it was Kari Patel who said they didn't have the resources to develop romance well, and if they were going to do it, they wanted it to be remarkable, not half-baked. I can respect that, but it's another sign that this isn't really a AAA game. On the flip side, dialogue with companions can be surprisingly deep and engaging. They'll explain how they feel, let you encourage them, express opinions about you, and, once certain criteria are met, they'll teach you and even boost your attributes. I've already said this, but I'll say it again. Party banter at camp is great. It makes companions feel alive and gives each one a distinct temperament. Generally speaking, I find the writing for companions to be quite good.
Just the noise. A low, deep banging starts, and it rattles through your bones and shakes you to your core. And it replaces the beat of your heart with this droning on and on and on until you forget every other sound you've ever heard. And then, as it just gets louder and louder, and right before it gets there, I wake up.
You've been listening to too many of Giada's ghost stories.
And let me tell you, waking up in a cold sweat does nothing for my fur. How sibilant. No. Just that it's all-encompassing. It's strange. I've not told many of the details of my dream. I suppose I must like you quite a bit, Envoy. Don't let it inflate your ego too much. I suppose we should try and get some rest now. I'll have some tea ready for when we awaken later.
You know what I miss? Flashberries.
Oh, I loved those as a child. The gifted magpie used to make a delicious flashberry jam.
Ooh, sweet and a little tangy, with a nice snap when you bite down. Huh. A little spicy burn if you leave the seeds in.
Oh, that's it. Now I'm hungry again. And I would kill for a flashberry.
I'll have to get some more of those next time I'm in the stair.
Now that I think of it, my father had a recipe for flashberry pie. I'll write it down for you later.
I knew I liked you. I just never knew why until this very moment.
I'll wrap this section up by saying Marius has the best quips and Yatzli has an absolutely evil laugh.
If you're really quiet, you can hear actors' souls dying as people just keep on walking.
The game is visually vibrant, colorful, and quite impressive, more so in its environment than in its character models, I would say. Every zone is aesthetically distinct, ranging from weird overgrown woods to crags, decayed fields, and barren wastelands. At night, it's even more striking. Some sceneries are truly stunning, and sometimes the game toots its own horn by having a companion make a comment about it. A central theme of the game is the vast, heavy presence of a corrupted form of nature, and it's visually represented everywhere. Even dungeons have their own little themes. Ancient underground ruins with waterfalls, a mine-turned spider nest, or eerie shrines to the gods. The skyboxes are excellent, and like in many modern productions, you can watch the clouds drifting high above with the wind. It's a nice touch. There are a few spots, one in each zone I believe, where you can climb to a great height, admire the scenery, and then jump down into the sea or a pool. Don't be like me and aim well. Everything is handcrafted and shows an incredible attention to detail, from fossils on cliffs to the environmental storytelling. Character models are fine, though there's limited variety. Humans and elves share the same face permutations, and you'll notice a lack of genetic diversity, so to speak. I mean, you'll keep seeing the same eyes and general facial structures everywhere. Even Ardkallag from Baldur's Gate 3 makes a couple of cameos. Don't get me wrong, models aren't bad, just few in number. Omawa models are great though, and I honestly don't know if they have more variety or if they just look more interesting thanks to their unique skin textures. I also liked the dwarven models more than the human ones. I don't think they have more variety, they just felt more interesting. For some reason, a few armored NPCs are missing gloves or bracers, as if someone forgot to fully equip them. It's a very minor thing, but quite noticeable, especially when it happens with important NPCs. Animations are limited, and you'll start seeing them repeat quite often. One fun example is when an NPC gets excited or wants to prove a point, they'll start doing a little dance or bounce around. That said, there were a couple of surprisingly immersive moments, like companions sitting to watch an actor perform or shielding their eyes while gazing into the distance. And these weren't scripted cutscenes, they happened during regular gameplay. Main character animations, even in first-person view, show a high level of attention to detail. For example, when sprinting, the wizard closes their grimoire and tucks it in closer, just like you probably would if you were running with a book in hand. Speaking of grimoires, the unique ones have different artwork on their pages, which was a really nice touch. I did encounter a few graphical bugs, floating mushrooms or trees here and there, but nothing that ruined the experience. Occasionally, during dialogue, the camera picks a weird angle, but it doesn't happen too often. As I mentioned earlier, Avowed lets you play in third person if you want, or switch between first and third person with the press of a button. While occasionally a bit clunky, third person mode works surprisingly well, even in combat. To make a comparison, it's far more functional than Oblivion or Skyrim's third-person view, not counting the recent remastered version. They did a good job with it. Overall, I think the visuals of this game are of very high quality, and one of Avowed's strong points. They may not be on the level of Horizon Forbidden West, but they're still excellent, and they do a great job of conveying the atmosphere and setting of the Living Lands. The general sounds of Avowed show great attention to detail too, like producing an echo when you click something in a dungeon, cave, or canyon, or when grabbing a book from a niche.
That's how it's done, right there.
Music is generally ambient, sometimes sitting quietly in the background, easing you into the setting. Other times, it rises in volume and grandeur during poignant moments.
First rule of Godless Ruins, don't touch anything.
Every zone has its own soundtrack, and I have to say it really fits the general vibe they're trying to convey for that specific place. Some eerie tunes heavily reminded me of the Horizon Zero Dawn soundtrack, which I found impressive. Venus Theory did a very good job with the music in Avowed, at least in my opinion. Voice acting is heavily present in this game, of course, being as character-centric as it is. The first performance you'll likely notice is Kai, voiced by Brandon Keener. He voiced Garrus in the Mass Effect trilogy, and I think most of Kai's charisma comes from Brandon Skinner's acting. Kai is a pretty simple man with a lot of common sense, so he might come across as bland. I think Obsidian purposely chose a well-known and skilled voice actor to make him stand out, and Keener absolutely delivered.
Closure. I never understood the term. Just feels like swallowing the thing that makes you sick. Here's the truth. I led a patrol. We were ambushed. Tama came to our rescue. And he suffered a fatal wound in the process.
All companions are voiced very well. Giata has a really warm voice that feels like it's embracing you, and Yatsli is so over the top that I can't help but appreciate the work Anjali Bhimani did with her. Marius is also great, especially when he complains or delivers his quips in a deadpan manner.
Are you seeing anyone, Marius? Romantically, I mean.
Right. I knew this would come up eventually.
I only bring it up because romance is good for the soul.
So is finding a good pile of deer saka on a hunt, but I'm not advising you to go looking for it.
Under the right conditions, you can even measure the energy of a romantic tryst. Isn't that fascinating?
To you, sure.
Oh well. Let me know if you change your mind. I know a lot of shy academics in need of an experienced guide.
I'll let you know.
How did you and Quilici meet? For some reason, he won't tell me the story. Was it scandalous? Did you seduce him away from a noble heiress, and now you're both in hiding?
No, it's a tale as old as time, my dear. We locked eyes across the bar back in Fjord, and he was a goner. The moment he found out I wanted to see Naku to death, he offered to take me there. So off we went. And once I'd gotten my fill of the ruin's exterior,
the Dream Scourge is proof that an unprecedented metaphysical disaster can take place at any time.
Well, that's a load off my mind. Sure beats not constantly worrying about the future.
In the general NPC population, I found the
Giada
fewer
will be
Messiverno
interested to learn
accents to
that the
sound
Dream
almost
Scourge
completely
cannot
fake
just
and
be
delivered
studied
with
in a lab.
difficulty.
Its nature is wild, so it has to be studied in the wild. Our machines and experiments would meddle with it too much.
And like anything affecting the soul, it must be connected to essence. Thus, if she wishes to discover more about the Dream Scourge, a Pillar of Adra would be a good place to start.
In contrast, I really loved the Dwarven accent. I did some research, and apparently it's heavily inspired by Romanian, with many of Marius's curses closely resembling real Romanian swear words.
Another Adiran. Damned if I ever saw the like. So you're the envoy they reported at the gate. Beats turning away the refugees from Shatterscarp, at least. Is it true that many drop dead suddenly?
Some of those dwarves also have a certain attitude, and I really liked it. I'd say that, in general, Avowed voice acting is done well, with a few notable exceptions.
Maybe they somehow wrap themselves up in an existing tree.
Not with the way this trunk has grown.
I'm stumped.
And you notice these few situations even more because of the contrast with the rest of the performances. To wrap everything up, Avowed is a game I enjoyed quite a bit. It took me a long time to thoroughly play it and produce this video. Life got in the way too, with busy work moments and family health issues to address. I'm not exclusively a retro gamer. I enjoy RPGs across all time periods. When you can't do this full time, it's a given that your publishing times will be longer, and there is no real way to compete with people who have early preview keys and can dedicate 12 hours a day to video production. So I'm curious to see if the hype and interest for Avowed has completely faded, and if I should stick with older titles and focus on building my own portfolio of experiences to showcase, or if there are still players out there interested in this title. If you help me reach that 1000 subscribers mark, I will buy more kibble for my cats, because they clearly need it. I know I've been nitpicky here and there, but that doesn't mean Avowed isn't worthy. The only real downside of this game is its price tag, and I recommend buying it, but only on sale. Setting a price of 70 euros or US dollars is steep for a not fully AAA production. I don't think Obsidian has anything to do with the price though. It's probably Microsoft inflating their game prices to sell the Game Pass. Or just big companies thinking they can milk gamers more, and I quote, if they are true fans, while the true masterpieces of this year are in the $40-50 range. This is not the first action RPG for Obsidian, but it feels somewhat like a new chapter. They did their best with the troubled production cycle and maybe wasted some of that budget that could have been spent on expanding the loot and crafting systems or adding more companions. Some recent news, as of the day I'm recording this, is that Kari Patel has left Obsidian and joined Night School Studio as game director. That's the indie studio owned by Netflix. I didn't even know Netflix had a gaming branch, but Night School developed Oxenfree 1 and 2, narrative-driven, story-rich games. I don't want to read too much into it, since there's a fair bit of turnover in the games industry, but the fact that she left to return to the indie space might be telling. If you strive to do everything Avowed has to offer, the game can provide a lot of hours of entertainment, if you accept it for what it is. Obsidian took the intricate Pillars of Eternity franchise and set it in a watered-down, action-oriented direction, and I think they succeeded at that. It lost some of the RPG finer details, but it's still a game with plenty of RP decisions to make, compared to the other actions RPGs. In other words, the story is less intriguing than in the CRPGs of the same franchise, but there are still decision-making moments that make you stop and think, and ask yourself, what the heck am I doing? I think Avowed is a strong step in the right direction for Obsidian. It has a lot of potential. I hope they don't drop the CRPGs though. I don't know if there are any DLCs planned. I've seen no real talk about that, and with Patel gone, who knows. If they focus on a sequel, with a clear direction from the start and learning from their mistakes, expanding on some systems that were too rushed and daring more with the story, I think Avowed 2 will be an extremely interesting game, something the Elder Scrolls 6 might be afraid of. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Please like, comment and subscribe, it all helps me reach more RPG players out there. Let me know what you think of this game. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.